Sagicor e-Advantage. Bank with ease, as you please, like a breeze. Pay no fees, rain or shine, save your time. It's so fine when you bank online.
Finally, there's a savings account that meets your need for speed and ease. Sagicor Bank e-Advantage. Bank online, no monthly fees, unlimited free Sagicor Bank ABM withdrawals, interest on your money. Sagicor Bank e-Advantage.
It's so fine when you bank online.
Open your Sagicor Bank e-Advantage account today.
Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar, handled The Strategists Speak. My name is Novia MacDonald-White and I'm your host. Thank you for joining us. Today's webinar is powered by Sagicor, Digicel and Carreras Limited. The strategists speaking today are from the Bahamas, Joseph Gaskins, co-founder and senior partner, Open Current. Marcia Erskine from Jamaica, the managing director, Marcia Erskine and Associates. From Trinidad and Tobago, Nissa Pierre, the managing director, principal publicist at Peartree Consulting, and CEO at Move, M-O-O-V. From Jamaica, Odette Dixon, corporate communications lead. From the United States of America, Chris Chambers, principal of the Chamber Group, via Jamaica, might I hasten to add. From the United Kingdom, Stuart Watts, award-winning global entertainment publicist. From Nigeria, Adeoye Omotayo, who is the director at R&B Public Relations Limited. And from Italy, via The Rock, let me hasten to add, Tamu McPherson, founder, All the Pretty Birds. I'm delighted to welcome you all. And without further ado, it's handled.
Kevin, I hear you're looking for a fight and understand we don't have much time.
We don't. And I just wasted half an hour waiting for you. So before we get to anything, you're going to convince me why I should go with you in the first place.
Okay, we're done. Don't let the door hit you on the way out.
What?
You heard me. Only one of us is facing bankruptcy, and it isn't me. So instead of scolding me for being late, you needed to be convincing me why I should save your dying company. So, nice to meet you.
Loyalty.
What did you just say?
I have a game-changing contract that's guaranteed to come my way in 6 weeks if we can show solvency.
Guaranteed by who?
My college roommate.
And you tell that to your bankers, word gets out, it's up for bid. Your competitors undercut you, and your roommate won't be able to help you anymore.
But if we make it 6 weeks, we're back in business. And I guarantee we'll never leave you.
Here's the thing, Kevin. I don't give a shit about a regional trucking company that's only going to increase our billings 1%. I get you out of this, your stock's going to go through the roof.
You want a piece?
I want 20%.
No way.
You're the one coming to me, okay? 80% of something is a whole lot better than 100% of nothing.
You gonna fight out there like you just did in here?
This is the preseason, Kevin. I haven't even broken a sweat.
Can I ask what you're acting as my witness? Just stay by my side. Don't say anything. Cute dog. Golden Retriever?
Yeah. His name's Thomas Jefferson, which is lame, I know, but he's very presidential. Aren't you, TJ?
Amanda, it would be a mistake to think there will be no consequences to you telling lies about the president.
How do you know my name? Who are you?
My name is Olivia Pope, and I want to be clear, I'm not here in any official capacity. I'm only here to warn you because you should know what could happen. It could become hard for you to find employment. Your face would be everywhere. People would associate you with a sex scandal. All kinds of information about you would easily become available to the press. For example, you've had 22 sexual partners that we know of. Also, there's that ugly bout of gonorrhea. And your family. Your mother's mental illness, a psychotic break, 2 years at Bedford Hospital. I bet that's private. She runs a daycare now, right?
He told me he loved me. He gave me this dog.
See, it's those kind of lies that could hurt you if you said them to other people not as nice as me. I'll give you some free advice. Hand in your resignation, then pack up your dog and your things, get in your car and go. Find a small city, Minneapolis maybe, or Denver. Get a little job, meet a boring boy, make some friends. Because in this town, your career is over. You're done.
Why are you doing this to me? I'm a good person.
You know who else was a good person? Monica Lewinsky. And she was telling the truth, but she still got destroyed. If you get subpoenaed in front of a grand jury, you can testify as an officer of the court that I was working on my own. I didn't blackmail or threaten her. If you don't get subpoenaed, this never happened. It's handled.
From the Bahamas, we welcome Joseph Gaskins, co-founder and senior partner, Open Current. Welcome, Joseph.
And to everyone listening, it's really a pleasure and an honor to be included in your company. And I am happy to take part in this fantastic event. Should I start by talking a little bit about who I am and what we do at Open Current?
Or you can tell us about how many situations like you've just seen that you've handled.
I wouldn't be a good handler if I talked about situations like that. I could probably be sued too. But you know, a lot of the work that we do at Open Current is about saving things in the midst of a crisis. My background is actually in politics and sociology. I have a bachelor's in politics and a master's in race, ethnicity, and post-colonial studies. But the work we do at Open Current, which is a fairly new firm, is diverse, I think is the best way to put it. So we're kind of a Swiss knife firm. We do research and insights, we do public relations, and we also do government relations work. We are the only firm in the Bahamas with our own polling capabilities. We also do qualitative research. And we really believe that data is important to informing the work that we do. We have both public sector and private sector clients, and I can talk about situations in both of those buckets of work. We've been privileged to work with Fortune 500 companies who are foreign direct investors here in the Bahamas to help save massive development projects. In one instance, we were able to come in with a project that was worth about $400 million and save that project. It was drowning in public opinion issues, and we were hired to ensure that it got the necessary approvals. And we moved that project from risk, from being risky and perhaps not actually happening to the approval process. And we do that kind of work quite often. On the public sector side, on the private sector side, we do everything from public relations work to drafting legislation for our clients when government's not moving fast enough, right? So, it's really a full service mix. We also do work on the public sector side as well. Everything from helping the new High Commission, the UK High Commission get set up here in Nassau, to assisting specific ministries around specific campaigns for public education. So it's a really, really diverse set of work. And in this moment, with the backdrop of COVID-19, and even with the concerns around racial equity that we're seeing kind of spilling out from the United States and really coming to our shores here in the Bahamas, we are looking at ways as a firm to support our clients, but also to be good citizens here in the Bahamas. So that's a little bit about what we do and kind of the work that we have been doing.
Thank you very much. Marcia Erskine, the Managing Director of Marcia Erskine and Associates, and a handler. We're not hearing you.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, we are. And you're gone again. Not too sure what's happening.
Am I on?
Yes, you are on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. I want to begin by reading a quick quote that I got from Dato Hisham. He's president of the Dale Carnegie Malaysia, and he coined it simply powerful food for thought. What if 2020 isn't cancelled? What if 2020 is the year we've been waiting for? A year so uncomfortable, so painful, so scary, so raw, that it finally forces us to grow. A year that screams so loud, finally awakening us from our ignorant slumber. A year we finally accept the need for change, declare change, work for change, become the change. A year we finally band together instead of pushing each other further apart. 2020 isn't cancelled, but rather the most important year of them all. And I start with that because I firmly believe that that is so. I think that as with all disruptions, there are opportunities as well as there are threats. And in my shop, we're about agility, adapting, and the new word being coined around COVID-19, pivoting. We're big into airlines, banking, public utilities, and tourism. And so right away, those are some of the industries that are being severely impacted by COVID-19, a lot of closures, a lot of furloughs, a lot of layoffs. And they too have to be pivoting in how they operate, going for more efficiency and effectiveness. We know that in crises, people tend to go for brands that they respect and know well. And thankfully, some of those brands are the ones we manage. So we're trying to do what we can to bring everything back to whatever they want to call it, the new normal, the old normal. I suspect it's going to be a mix of both.
Yeah.
And that's what we are about.
Thank you. Nisa Pierre from Trinidad and Tobago.
Hi, Novia. Morning. Morning to my fellow panelists and, of course, everyone who's tuned in. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. So I think I'm going to speak directly to what we saw in that clip by the incomparable Olivia Pope.
Absolutely.
The thing that really stood out to me is, her preparedness and the research. She walked into this obviously very tense situation that could have gone any way, but she had the tools at her disposal, to really handle it, and she did. But in this period, you also wonder, what about situations you haven't prepared for? I'm not sure that any of us, in all the work that we do, around the world, around the Caribbean, that we even considered, a pandemic. So now we kind of have to do our own reset and think, okay, how do we use our tools of research and, background knowledge and crisis comms plans? How do we now transfer that into something that really was completely unexpected? But the data also, as Joey mentioned, the data also spoke to that we should have been ready. So now we think of, all right, so what do we do now with those same tools that Olivia Pope, uses at her disposal? I'm not a huge fan of this show, but I've certainly, seen all the tweets and read lots of think pieces about, about her work and, what it represents for PR, particularly in crisis comms. So it's an interesting time, I think, for all of us, really having to stretch and flex muscles that we've had before and work on some of those that we didn't even know existed. I spoke to Novia just, when we were trying, setting up this call, and I said, I kind of likened this period to an intense workout. You know that it's going to hurt. You know that some muscles are going to hurt, but then you kind of realize, hey, I didn't know I could actually do this.
Yes.
And I think that that's what this crazy COVID-19 pivot, new normal, old normal period is.
Thank you, Nisa. We're in Jamaica with Odette Dixon, NEAF, Corporate Communications Lead. Good morning.
Thank you. If there's any way I could characterize the last 6 months, it would surely be about leadership, and those who have it and those who don't. I think the substance of what we're experiencing now is for us to understand where to put our energies and how to motivate the people who we need to come along with us. I also think that the last 6 months have shown, particularly the companies that I work with, the value of purpose. Last year, I think it was that CEOs of some top global companies signed a memorandum of understanding that essentially put profit behind purpose. And I think, if anything, we have seen how a focus on purpose is going to let the strong survive now and after.
Thank you very much. Chris, how are you?
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning from New York.
Yes, the hot place during COVID right now,
That's
but
right.
we're surviving. It's been interesting these past couple months because, as I think we've all been saying, COVID definitely was something that we weren't expecting, along with this movement that is happening, which actually was needed here in America, and as we've seen, has spawned into a global movement, which I think is going to make such differences across the globe, and in communities that have been really affected by just the racial injustices. When it comes to the Chamber Group, we've been around 13 years now, almost 13 years, and our specialty is PR and branding, and we've worked with people from the entertainment industry, the music industry, like Erykah Badu and Jill Scott and Lee Daniels, the director, and HBO and Netflix, to fashion houses like Valentino and Armani. What people know us for is sculpting the profile and the look of a brand, whether it's a person or a company, in the public eye. So that's what our niche pretty much is. And during this time of COVID, it's been really interesting, because even I thought that with everything shutting down and closing, and just people worried about their health and finances, that PR, branding would take on a different pace. But what has happened, and it's been a learning process for all of us, is that COVID has kind of reminded us that we were moving into this era of technology, and not even moving. We were here, but I think now that we're all working from home and digital is just on fire. Traditional media, print and radio, is there, but digital has taken off, and we knew it has been, but over these past couple months, we've seen content creators really on fire, and it's really moved our business even further and at such a fast pace, and we're doing so much more. So, from a business standpoint, for a company like myself, like the Chamber Group, we're extremely busy. We're shaping stories every day for the clients beyond, their lane of fashion, music, TV, film. They're so entrenched in the conversations of, the social unrest to the, to COVID, that it's now a constant dialogue. And now we're just really figuring out carefully what makes sense in terms of the stories that they should be telling, where they how they want their brand to be perceived during such heavy times that are going on in society right now. But it's really beyond the health issues and trying to stay healthy and of course maintain a living. I've found that this time has been quite a learning experience in terms of business and how you really sometimes don't know what to expect, and it can take, even in such negative times and dark times, it can take on a positive a positive role.
Thank you, Chris. Stuart Watts, what's happening in the UK? Bring us the news from my favorite store, Selfridges. You're on. Can you unmute, Stuart, please? Right.
Hello,
Hi again.
my fellow. Hi. Welcome. Hello from London, and I hope you're all well. And thank you to the Jamaican Observer for having me, inviting me on today. Just to say that, I'm Stuart Watts. I've got a PR agency in London. I've worked in New York, in London, and I work globally now in 48 cities around the world with our clients. Our clients space from fashion, music, sport, film directors, to government, private sectors, private families. And we cover all areas. So we're more, they call us shapers in London. We're more of we shape things up, like Chris was saying, we shape things up. We concentrate on quite a few different areas. So we do shape things up into things moving forward. We come in with brands, we come with people, mainly people, at times when have helped to lay the foundation with management, and then also we work with lots of charities. I sit on 12 national charities around the world, committees, from the British Red Cross through to Global Citizen. We work very closely with, and Centre for Homeless Charity UK. So what we tend to do, and what this COVID-19, what support us is actually, I think that it's been very positive in London, but for me and our clients, because it's shown us that we can go back to basics. And actually, I think the world was gone far too fast. So it's now slowed the whole world down again. It's slowed us down again to rethink about what's important. And I think quality is now coming back over quantity. So moving forward, I think that my thing where we're at now is to try to bring unity back into the world, and humanity, and peace.
Thank you. From London to Nigeria, Adeoye, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm coming from sunny Lagos, Nigeria. I think it's 4:30 here. It's been an interesting sort of 3 months in the city. We were very slow to respond to the pandemic, if I'm being very honest. Our governments were very slow to do a lockdown. So what had happened was we were very much caught unawares. I mean, there's a running joke that Nigerians sort of treated COVID as an international pandemic. So nobody was everyone was just sort of carrying on until it was just a little bit too late. But just to give you a quick background into my business. So I'm a co-founder of a boutique agency in Lagos. Our focus is very much consumer public relations. We've had the privilege, not a right, to represent some of the most iconic global brands, from Coca-Cola to Guinness to Nike and so on and so forth. We've always run a very lean structure. So it's always been a very tight ship. It's 23 really talented men and women who work for the agency. And I think what this has really done, this period is just really forced us to sort of shave off the fat and really starting to think about what do we absolutely need when it comes to sort of ideation and really thinking outside of the box. So that's sort of like the biggest sort of key learnings for us. Unfortunately, the marketing landscape in this part of the world, we've sort of had huge budget cuts. And I don't know if that's the same in London or in New York or in other parts of the world, but I mean, we're facing huge budget cuts. So all of the clients have sort of addressed all the agencies to sort of either come up with a new sort of billing structure or just completely scrapped the initial scope of work for the previous pre-agreed year. So that's really pretty much where we are right now, where we're battling. But for me, what we've really been trying to focus on really is how do we create products as an agency, as opposed to just be only offering a service. Because what we found is sort of the organizations, for example, the digital companies who have products, have the ones who have sort of, I would say, won around this period. So for us, we've been thinking very much around what sort of products can we create that will be sort of weatherproof, so to speak. So pandemic, no pandemic, you know, there is a need for that product. So that's really where our mind space is. And we're investing heavily in content creation. So content in this part of the world is big. I don't know if you guys are aware. Just a couple of days, Netflix went into partnership with a major production company in this country called Ebony Life TV to sort of create 2 original Netflix originals. Now, that's a big deal. It might not be a big deal in other parts of the world, but in this part of the world, it's huge. It's a huge deal. So for us right now, content is king in this part of the world. Yes, they're not reading newspapers. Yes, very few people are listening to radio, but guess what? Everyone is sort of glued to their, you know, to their mobile phones and their iPads and their screens. So it's very much about how do we tap into that part, that slice of that market. So that's pretty much where we've been in the last sort of 3 months.
Thank you very much. And thanks for breaking the Netflix. Tamu. Tamu in Milan, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to convene with you here and to meet such lovely, lovely people and professionals in the Caribbean and the diaspora. And I work as a content creator. I've been working as a content creator since 2006. So I have been able to observe and experience all of the evolution of digital publishing from that time, from blogs to social media platforms. During COVID in Europe, Italy was at the epicenter of the outbreak, and we were on total lockdown, which required any content creator here or in other European countries that were affected to really become creative in creating the content. In terms of projects, most of our work was put on hold until lockdowns were lifted in the respective cities and countries, and we were inside. So I think most of us really spent the time evaluating our creativity. We had the time to do so because today, the most content creators, we travel all over the world and constantly. So having to stay still at home, most of us were creating content for Instagram, and there was a huge increase in traction of TikTok as we were trying to figure out new formats to publish in. You know, if you look at our content, usually our content is the settings are outside or they're at major fashion events, you know, all over the globe. And at home, we had to really become creative with what we were producing. Now we're at a moment where there has been a reckoning of the industry in terms of racism and inequality, and that is completely changing the playing field. It's leveling the playing field, and a lot of us are speaking out on behalf of our fellow Black professionals and brands and companies and publishing houses are responding, and everyone is observing, will their responses be performative, or are we going to really be able to effectuate change this time around? Because obviously this is not the first time. So that's where we are, and I am hopeful because everyone is speaking out, and there is so much strength in our unified voices that brands are paying attention.
Thank you very much. We already have questions from our viewers, but just the second round for all of you. You have spoken about the importance of sculpting the profile, digital content, weatherproofing, the huge budget cuts. Let me start at the top again with you, Joseph. What has this period really taught you?
Oh, that's big. So, like I said, our work at the firm splits in two ways: private sector, and that portfolio, we consult on that portfolio. It's about 1.2 billion in projects here in the Bahamas, right? Not including some of our local clients, and then public sector. On the private sector side, I think part of what we're learning is that businesses, must play a larger role in kind of the social work here in the Bahamas. And one of the things about being a tourism-based economy with such a disproportionate amount of the economy reliant on tourism is that when something like a pandemic happens and borders close, you have massive amounts of Bahamians who are unemployed. Mm-hmm. You have massive amounts of businesses that are closed, businesses that are connected to the industry that are closed. And so, what we are doing is, one, sometimes we are having to turn inside. And so we've gone from a lot of external comms to internal comms, ensuring that our businesses, employees, the people that rely on them to operate, that they are communicating what is happening in clear, but also in empathetic ways to ensure that their employees, their internal stakeholders understand what's happening, right? But also that companies have a responsibility, whether that is on the safety side or whether that is giving what they can or getting out of the way of government work, right? To mitigate the public health crisis. So we've done more internal comms work, I think, than we ever have. And doing that work is important. The other thing on that is, if I write another, I hope your families are well and safe, the public health crisis is, paramount. And so part of what we're having to do is find new language than the kind of form communications, mm-hmm. right, that you're seeing everywhere, that you're getting in your inbox through direct emails and that kind of stuff. Finding new ways to tell the story of the pandemic in particular, and doing it in a way that connects with people, especially internal stakeholders. On the public sector side, mm-hmm. Telling people that they have to be locked in their houses for 2 months is not an easy thing. And then coming out right after and having to present a national budget with the largest deficit in the history of the country is also not an easy thing to do, mm-hmm. right? And so how do we one, educate Bahamians and ensure that people understand what we need them to do to keep themselves safe and their neighbors safe, right? While also ensuring that feeling of community and togetherness is a part of that message, because we cannot overcome the current climate as individuals. This is a community-wide effort. So the communication has to be both, one, educational and at the same time inspiring around community. And then we have to, at certain places, be persuasive, because you have a population that has never had to go to the IMF, that has never had to engage in kind of massive debt spending or huge deficits, right? And you have to explain in clear terms why we were in the position that we are in right now. And so we are learning to do to use new kinds of language, build new kinds of narratives, use new forms, especially around public engagement. So, getting the Bahamian government, for example, to do virtual events. When we proposed that to one of our public sector clients, we were told it was impossible. I'm like, I've been doing Zoom meetings for 5 years. There's Skype before that, but literally dragging the public service into the 21st century so that they can engage with their stakeholders. But also, we need to be persuasive, because this is a moment when, as a population, as a country, we are experiencing things that we never have before. So it's kind of we're not just walking and chewing gum at the same time. We're chewing gum and building a house at the same time, right? And really trying to bring all of our tools to bear in this moment to do multiple things and carry multiple messages through new mediums. And I think that is really where we are learning, but also beginning to excel and picking up very quickly. I don't know if that makes sense.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Marcia, you're in tourism, so you can pick up from, a lot of what Joseph, I'm sure you could empathize with a lot of what Joseph has posited. What's your takeaway from this? Not that the crisis is over, but...
The crisis is far from over.
Correct.
And what we have seen is that we have to be speaking to both the infected and the affected. So you have people who have had COVID and have recovered. You have people whose families and friends have had COVID and died. And while they mourn that loss, you have a large group of people who are also mourning the loss of their jobs. So Chris is right. Joseph is right, that we have to be relating both to the internal audience and the external audience. We have a series of people who never knew the word furlough before COVID-19. It's a new word in their vocabulary. And when it relates directly to them, in one fell swoop, one day they were going to work to a company that they thought is a Fortune 500 company, or great global leader, or great local leader, or great Caribbean leader. And the next day they know, well, you're going home, because the law kind of allows for 120 days furlough and stuff like that. And we're not giving you much to go home with, or we're going to give you a care package, or we're going to give you 2 weeks salary or 3, whatever it is. But it's a shock to the system, especially if you are the breadwinner in your family and so on. So we have those issues with people feeling a little hurt that the company that they thought they were giving all their all to was so easily able to send them home. So the programs have to be treating with that audience. Then we have the external audience. And as you say, in tourism, we have the visitors, we have our local folks, we have the employees again, and everything. And to let them know that there is still value in the product, that the product is strong, that we are putting in all the protocols to make it as safe as possible. I mean, all of this is new to all of us. None of us have ever been, very few of us have ever been in any pandemic, anything close to it. So we were whistling and riding. But what is critical, as I believe Chris said, is that we have to go back to basics. We're trying to make sure that the product is good and safe. There are a lot of people who, at the first brush of COVID, the first thing they do was to disband their communication teams, right? Which is crazy, because if there's any time when you need to be communicating to everybody, it is now. I understand the rush to cut advertising, but still, you still have to do it because there's a message to be told. But the critical thing, and I agree with you there, Joseph, is the message. It's not a time for hard sell. It's a time for your customer social responsibility programs to be kicking in, for your strengthening of your relationships with your communities and your employees and your customers, so that we know, people keep saying we're all in this together. Yes, we're all in this together. But we can't seem to be trying to benefit from other people's challenges.
Thank you, Marcia. Nisa, you've been pretty vocal, complaining, you can't go out, you can't get your hair done. You're in Trinidad and Tobago. you know, in the Bahamas, in Jamaica, tourism really is front and center. Not so much in Trinidad, but, you know, you're all miserable, you're all upset. Our KFC stayed open, yours didn't. What were your takeaways? What have been your takeaways, Nisa?
So two things, both Joey and Marcia said, you know, really raised some great points, particularly about the fact that lots of companies, you know, they think that if communications or marketing doesn't directly impact operations, you know, in a time when things are lean, unfortunately, you know, agencies, staff members, whatever, you know, consultancies, whatever we are, sometimes we're the ones who, you know, we're on the shopping block first. And it is counterintuitive because, of course, now is a time that you really need to talk, and you need to talk sincerely, factually, and, you know, with some degree of sensitivity, because there is job loss, there is, you know, literal death, there is mourning, there's mourning of, you know, loved ones, there's mourning of careers, there's mourning of economies, there's mourning of, you know, social lives. I am not, I wouldn't call myself a social butterfly, but when I decline an invitation, I like to know that it's, you know, my choice to do so, not that there's just no invitations left to either accept or decline. But it is, you know, like I said, a time for all of us, you know, in whatever we do, whatever clients we serve, whether, you know, like me, they're from athletes to governments to, you know, restaurants, for example. You know, I think one of the worst things you can do in this time is go dark and think that, you know, if you're not open, for example, to serve your public, that you don't speak to them. But it's not true at all. I've actually seen, you know, restaurants and even, you know, social groups. So, you know, from carnival bands to all these party committees and all of these different things, they've really found a way to continue talking to whoever their clientele is. And you really do have to commend, you know, these strategists and people like us who are behind, you know, that messaging. So the restaurants, even though you can't sit there and enjoy, you know, they give you the home recipes for all of your favorite cocktails or some of your favorite dishes. Or you have, you know, people have, I mean, I think at the end of this, I'm probably never going to use the word again, but have pivoted to to having these online brunches or parties, which may not be for me, but, you know, you do see the engagement that is way up. For us in Trinidad here, we've also seen almost a total transformation of e-commerce and digital business, both in private and public sector. So for a long time, Novia mentioned KFC. For a long time, KFC and, you know, some of the pizza restaurants were the only ones who offer delivery, food delivery. And now you have a situation where, you know, this global event has forced many of the restaurants into, whether it's curbside, delivery, whatever it is. And there's all of these conveniences that we all wanted before, but there was no real impetus to do so. And I imagine that it's going to continue thereafter, you know, in terms of the government services. We have, you know, you can now book any appointment at the licensing office online, and so many other things have come online that, you know, you really are beginning to see the transformation here. But the real, you know, the crux of the matter of all of it is really that constant communication and dialogue, really recognizing who your stakeholders are, what they want to hear from you, what they need from you at this time, what they're going to need thereafter. So if it's, you know, customers to your own employees, you know, you do have, as someone mentioned, a lot of focus is now on internal communication, because these are the people who, you know, you need to be on your side during this time and thereafter, after they're furloughed, after you're able to, you know, kind of ride through this period and rehire them. They also don't want to know that you've not spoken to them in all of this time. And, you know, when things are, you know, looking up again, all of a sudden, you know, you're back, hey, how are you? You know, where were you all of the time when, you know, times were lean? So I think, like I said, for us in Trinidad, and I imagine for all of us across the board, I mean, at Pear Tree, we do events as well. So a lot of, I mean, that part of the business has completely shut down for obvious reasons. But we maintain, you know, open lines of communication with those clients, you know, talking about either virtual events, smaller events, you know, boutique events when we are able to open, you know, so communication has not and should not at all just stop in this period.
Thank you very much, Nisa. the importance of communication. Odette, what has been your takeaway?
Quite simply, we're not in this together if we weren't in this together before. A lot of people have defaulted to this kind of feel-good message. I think we can count on every minute that we see a message, hashtag we're in this together. A lot of people are falling back on that message when they never really cultivated the meaning of that message before, in our case in Jamaica, before March, in globally, I would say before January. So if you are not really invested in your communities and in your people, when crisis hit, you can't turn around and start drawing on a bank of credibility and trust that you've never had before. The other thing that this experience has taught me is that leaders need to speak with brutal honesty and credible hope. It goes beyond us crafting a message. I think the best leaders are the ones who have some kind of connection to their people and to their communities. I'm sure Tamu and Chris can comment a little bit about certainly what is happening in the fashion industry globally when all of a sudden everybody's drawing for their Black friend or their Black history. But if we didn't trust that you were doing the right things before, we're certainly not going to trust that you're doing the right things now. I mean, there's always a time for rehabilitation and change, but these last 6 months have taught me what is necessary for companies and for brands is for them to understand the people that they serve, so that when they need to draw on some trust, it's there for them.
Sound. Chris?
You know,
trust, the language, the communication.
It's been a very, I think, delicate time for all of us on this side of the fence of communications and controlling the narrative, because, you know, I forgot who said it on the panel, but we're in a time where you don't ever want to come across like you're pushing something right now, that you're selling, you know, because people are just in a place of trying to figure it out day by day. No one is thinking about online shopping or the new movie that's coming out or the new album in that sense of, you know, how we were moving, especially here in America, where it's, you know, the consumption is always more, and, you know, I have to be on top of everything and I have to be so relevant, where, you know, in a sense, the general message here when I speak to people and clients is this was almost a necessary reset to slow it down, have us really think about how we're moving in life. And it's interesting to see, even in business, clients understanding that right now it's if you are selling something, it needs to somehow tie into the overall dialogue that's happening right now during these challenging times. You know, I have a client that's releasing an album on Friday, and, you know, she's pretty popular here in America. And, you know, it's a different rollout than what we're used to. I mean, there is a demand for her, but the push and the campaign is a lot more, I would say it's a lot more subdued because, again, people are trying to figure out how they're paying their mortgage, you know, health insurance, you know, just survival. And it's almost a little bit insensitive when, you know, you're pushing a product and telling people they need this, you know, this new body of art, which of course the art right now, the arts are still necessary because we need those moments to kind of take you out of the heaviness that we're all living through right now. But in terms of promoting and the communication, you know, there's a lot more thought into how do you want to bring this product to life and bring awareness to it without seeming like you're not part of this thing that's happening right now. So it's, you know, it's, I think we're all day by day trying to figure out how to still be creative, but within this unique times that we're going through.
Some might suggest to you, though, Chris, that you suggest to the clients that they put it on hold. Is that, would that have been a no-no, or is it just that you're going to use a different approach in terms of rollout?
I think that some people, you know, some clients and people that we do business with have agreed that maybe we should push back certain projects and, you know, wait a little while to check the temperature of what's going on in the country and even the world. And then, you know, there are certain clients where we've kind of, you know, taken on a different language. Like, for example, we work with Lee Daniels, the director, and his next film is about Billie Holiday. And it's a very interesting story because it's a different take on Billie Holiday from the original film done with Diana Ross and Berry Gordy produced, where this focuses more on the struggle that she had with the American government and her drug problem. And in a sense, you know, this movie is almost, it's that kind of creative and body of work that is almost necessary right now that we all feel has to come out during these times, because the dialogue of it is so what's happening right now. So for someone like me, we're just now trying to be creative in terms of the language and the marketing rollout and the media rollout of how Lee should present this body of work without being the Hollywood big time director, but more saying to his community, you know, this is a body of work that I created, and I hope that not only movie fans, but even, you know, what's going on in the political realm, that people will see that it's really telling a smart story that hopefully we can learn from. So kind of focusing, with a project like this, kind of focusing more on the messaging of such a good body of work.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. The perfect segue, I think, Stuart, in terms of your clients. What has your language been to them? How have you been communicating with them, and vice versa? You're on mute, Stuart. Right.
All entertainment and hospitality business, obviously, all work. All my clients work. They don't have any work for the foreseeable future. So we've found ways. What it's taught me, it's found ways to obviously lots of virtual. How we put in charities where we had lots of artists doing virtual performances, chats. Like Chris was saying, I think it's going back to basics and going back and educating, and just bringing people to and lots of our role models as well, especially in music, in sport, and in film, have been, you know, doing virtual chats with different brands and different networks. And I think their role is more prominent now than ever, because I think it's not just being a face of the brand. I think it's more of educating, trying to go back into communities, bringing people back together, explaining. It's a whole different concept now, not just promoting your brand. You're actually educating everybody in the world now about what should be happening. It's like a whole new world. And I think it was needed as well, because I think people were just running so fast. But now it's more, especially in the music business. I mean, I've got DJs and people who are global, who work all over the world. And even them, they found ways which they never thought they would find to create a new way of working. And I think it's from my point, it's taught me, it's taught all our artists a new way forward, and things can be done at a slower pace, but more educational especially to the younger community, because I think that the younger community were going down this whole reality, sort of following lots of people in the reality world, and I think it sort of slowed all that down. And I think from my point, I've just seen a lot of the quality people, talented people, come forward more and become more role models, and actually, getting their point across. I mean, I'm very much into going back into communities, education, and trying to bring people back together again, because I think you have to go back to basics and fix that, and then everything else will grow. And I think with this last 3 months, I think that's what's actually happened from my point. And I've seen all my talents become very prominent, very vocal, helping bring people back together. And I think that was needed, especially in the entertainment business.
Thank you. Okay. Back to you, Adeoye. You spoke about, the content. Do you want to elaborate a bit more on, Netflix and the content, and also how you've maintained conversation with your clients, and some of them have obviously cut budget, but how you have perhaps, yes or no, gotten through to them that they ought to reconsider the positioning of their products or their brands.
Okay. There are many questions in that.
Yeah.
So one of the things we did really early on when COVID really kicked in, I think in the second week in April, was we went into partnership with a local research company. And because I am very much focused on the consumer market, what we had done was we had designed a pretty simple questionnaire just to sort of get a sense of the pulse of how people were feeling. And I think we had a sample size of like 2,000 Nigerians between the ages of 18 and 55. And some of the findings was pretty interesting. It was very much around, they wanted brands to sort of deviate a little bit away from the sort of heavy messaging because of COVID. They had found that a lot of the messaging was a bit too heavy and a bit too downcast. And they were sort of asking for brands to be a little bit more lighter in their approach, right? And they'd sort of given us some recommendations as to sort of content we could create. So essentially, I think 47%, and I'm not very technically savvy, so I don't know how to actually share my screen, but anyway, whatever. But essentially, they had said, I think 47% of them had said something along the lines of they actually wanted brands to sort of make them travel, forget their realities. And that sort of inspired a lot of the advice we had sort of given to our clients in terms of the kind of content you can be creating around this time. So what had happened was there's a lot of collaboration that has happened between sort of local comedians and a lot of influencers on Instagram who created really catchy skits. So what we had done was sort of like create really interesting sort of PSAs that wasn't too sort of like heavy from a messaging standpoint, but yet quite simple. And we had used that to really connect with our target audience. So that just gives you a sort of sense of how the average Nigerian was feeling, just in terms of the kind of what they wanted brands to be doing, so to speak. From speaking specifically to content, so I mean, put it this way, I don't know if any of you know much about the Nigerian landscape, but our internet penetration is sort of like jumping up, skyrocketing, like an average of 15% every year. just in terms of, data has become really affordable, which means that like sort of the average Nigerian, regardless of sort of what his disposable income is, can sort of have access to internet, which means that like Facebook is sort of like, it's our biggest sort of channel for connecting and social connecting. So what has happened very much is a lot of organizations, both local and international, they're investing very heavily in this market. So YouTube, I can't remember what the numbers are, but YouTube is sort of investing heavily in this market. And Netflix sort of came into the market in March this year. And they've been working with some of the best sort of content creators and filmmakers we have in this market to sort of create content, just purely because there's a bloody lot of us. I mean, there's 200 million Nigerians. I mean, I think it's something along the lines of 1 in every 7 Black person is in Nigeria. And we have I think we have the second biggest film industry in Nollywood.
Yes, you do.
From a churning out process, not quality. So don't judge bloody quality. The quality isn't great, but we can shoot a movie in 5 days. I mean, I can shoot a movie in my living room in 2 days. I
won't tell Naz you said so. I won't tell.
So clearly there's a huge appetite for us at the moment for content. So I very much have a huge history in the film industry. I've sort of taken a couple of Nigerian films to the Toronto Film Festival, the BFI, which is the London Film Festival, as well as Cannes. So in this market, it's sort of like a no-brainer. I mean, I think for us, it's really about how do we. I've always said Nigeria is one film away from really transforming the industry. So right now we're creating a lot of content, but quality-wise, it's storytelling isn't great. The quality of acting isn't great, right? So I just feel like we need one major film, right? So get the scripting right, get the acting right, get the director right, and literally, Oscars beware, we're coming, And I suspect their writing's on the wall, which is why there's a lot of investment. So there's look, YouTube isn't stupid, Netflix isn't stupid. I would be surprised if Amazon's going to come in next week, because, there is something happening in this part of the world right now, I just feel like, we need to invest very much in the quality of production. That's really where we're lacking. So lastly, to your question about what are we doing with clients, to be honest, right now, we've taken the hit. We've had to write off Q2 of 2020. I don't want to jinx anything because I'm a Christian and I'm very optimistic, but we might have to write off Q3 2020 as well. But what can you do? But all you can do right now is sort of be a partner. I was speaking to a client this morning and I said, look, we've had great times with you guys. We've been together for 4 years, and it's been good times. And this isn't a great time, and we kind of have to stick it out together. And I think that's really the best we can do right now. And of course, constantly doing these, keeping our ears on the ground, doing surveys, just getting a sense of how Nigerians are feeling, and then actually take that insight to create campaigns. Because as everybody on this panel knows, the best campaigns are created on insight, and that's pretty much what we're trying to do. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Thank you. Tamu, what has been your takeaway? You need to unmute as well, Tamu. Right.
So my takeaway from this experience is that it is essential for a brand or a content creator, whichever party, to listen to the audience. Listening to the audience during this period of time was my guide forward. I understood what they were interested in seeing and what content they were interested in providing. I also think that on the content creator side, on both sides, you really do have to think about the messaging. And as everyone has said here, you have to, basically create a message that reflects authentically the times. And in my personal experience, I use this period to reconnect with my audience because I had the time to do that. And I responded to, I'm just making sure that you can hear me, right? Because
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I responded directly to my audience, and I fulfilled some promises that I had made during the year because I had time. My audience wanted to see fashion content. They wanted to see my closet. They directly told me, look, this is a distraction that I need. However, it was very important for everyone to make sure that they weren't being tone deaf. This was a period of time where people were homeschooling their children. So, I even personally questioned myself when I would post something and say, oh, I'm looking in my shoe closet because my child is driving me crazy and I can't take it anymore. But when you're thinking about an essential worker who doesn't have the luxury, of saying something like that, the luxury of running to their shoe closet to look at it, to take a break from, the math lesson, and that was really important. What I found with the brands is because it's such a complex situation, especially here in Italy where the manufacturing takes place for most of the luxury brands, they didn't have the product to even put into the store. So it wasn't relevant on a marketing standpoint to actually go forward with a lot of the content that we had contracted to do. And so they also kind of followed suit with us, and they paused everything until after the lockdowns were lifted. But even those brands, I saw a lot of them creating content that was engaging and trying to build up loyalty for their consumer, for their client. The one thing that I have to say post lockdown, everything has changed because businesses were supposed to open again and they can't because of the social unrest. A lot of these properties are damaged, so that's not going to be a situation. A lot of brands are in serious financial trouble, and so they're going to be closing brick and mortar stores as well. And my work as a content creator in encouraging people to go into those stores and buy something, that's going to change. The other thing too is currently fashion has the opportunity to really rebuild its existence and the way it operates in the industry on so many levels. During COVID, the conversation was centered around rebuilding from a sustainable point of view and creating recreating systems that were truly sustainable, from the design of the product to the showing of the product to the delivery of the product, because the calendar did not make any sense anymore. And the number of collections that were being produced a year didn't make sense anymore. It was feeding into this consumer overdrive, and it wasn't good for the teams. It wasn't good for the environment. And now we are taking the industry to task to rebuild structures that are equal and that give everyone and that are inclusive and that are diverse. And that's where the focus is. So our industry can't even restart until it addresses this situation. And I agree with everyone. This pandemic and the subsequent social unrest revolution, I think it has divine timing, and I think that it is a direct act from the source that was requiring us to slow down, was requiring us to really reflect on our systems, and giving us the opportunity to really, really do better on every level. And I really believe that brands and all of the managers really, absolutely should pay attention, because it's going to be their loss if they don't make these changes now, and if they don't rebuild companies that are sustainable. I always say that diversity is sustainable. When you are not diverse, that is problematic. So equality for all peoples is sustainable. Racial equality for Black people is sustainable. The system as it was broken because of the, centuries of inequity.
We have quite a few questions here. Cecile wants to know, and anybody can answer this one. As humans, we have short memories. Do you really think the new normal will last beyond 2012? I think she means 2020. And will some of the pivoted business sustain once we get back to once we get back to being humans? As we already see, no social distancing, no mask wearing, and we're still in the middle of the pandemic. I will ask Marcia or Odette to answer that from Jamaica.
If I may, social distancing is a concept, certainly in Jamaica, that I think some people understand and some people accept. I think we have been faced with our own vulnerability in the early days of the pandemic, and just now when the restrictions have eased a little bit, people are trying to get back to living. I think on the issue of memory and going back to what Tamu was saying about sustainability, I do believe that brands in particular will have a different sense as to what matters most. They will understand truth when they see it. They will understand the importance of being authentic and connected to their communities. I see it a lot with my clients who now understand what an ecosystem of a business is, and perhaps the most important part of that ecosystem is the smallest unit. I'm optimistic, Cecile, because I feel that we had a moment of darkness, and even if we're not going back to the first 2 weeks of the pandemic where we were super cautious and super afraid, that I think the experience that we've lived these last few weeks will in fact teach us how to be better humans and how to be better brands.
Would you like to add anything, Marcia?
Hi. Yeah, I think she's right on. There will be some changes and some permanent changes, not all of it, not all of it. Whilst we look at the bottom line for some of our companies, we are reacting to COVID-19, and it means we're trying not to be tone deaf, and we're trying to do the right things. Some of us are going to sustain that going forward. Some of us, once we see some sort of back to the normal that we know, or as close to the normal that we know, we are going to get back to the systems as we had them in place, because we felt that those brought us the profits that we wanted. That's the truth of it. Those who have been ethical before in their dealings with consumers and with employees and so on, they're focused on that, and they're trying to increase their footprint there. Some who have not are trying to put some in place. Yeah. But as I started my comments at the beginning of the program, 2020 is a year of opportunity, and people are going to do what they can to survive 2020. And then, quite frankly, just as us in our personal behaviors, I mean, some of us wear the mask, some of us don't. Some of us are dying to go to a party and are going to a party. Some of us are dying to go to the beach and are going to the beach. So once we see a sort of normalizing of things, we're going to get back to the things that give us comfort.
Thank you. Joseph, here's a question for you from Toronto, Canada, Donette Chinloy. Joseph, how would you advise your government to open its border? There's also a question for you as well, Adeoye. It's how would you advise your corporate clients? How would you advise your corporate clients in terms of Black Lives Matter? I think that's the question. So first to you, Joseph, and then to Adeoye.
Yeah, that's a difficult question, and I think it's something that governments that depend on tourism are struggling with right now. So in the immediate term, we are seeing what has happened, for example, in Antigua, where people arrive in Antigua, get tested, 11 of them are positive, they get put into a government facility to quarantine, and then somewhere along the line they're retested and they're negative, right? And so so on the one hand, you balance the fact that 50% of the Bahamian GDP comes from tourism, and we need to reopen. And at the same time, the Bahamian citizens have been locked down for 2 months. And do we throw that all away because we need to get get Bahamians back to work? It's a very difficult question. I think our specialty isn't in public health, but I think a lot of us have said on this call, and it's important to reiterate this, that good strategy, its foundation is in data, right? Its foundation is in insights and research. And our governments, our corporations, brands need to be guided by that data, by that research, and that should be the primary input. And so the first thing I would do is tell the government to listen to the experts. Despite the economic needs, governments have to act in a way that balances those scientific opinions, that evidence against the economic concerns. So whatever those internal conversations are, it's really important for government, I think, in this moment, not to feel pressured. And then there are some there are some actors in the tourism industry that are not acting like partners to the country, right? And who are threatening governments and saying, listen, if you guys don't open by this date, we're gonna cut off airline routes to you, or we're not gonna sail, or we are gonna do X, Y, Z, et cetera. And so part of the work that governments have to do as well is remember who are good partners in the industry, and work with those partners, work with those brands to build out a strategy that responds to what's actually happening on the ground. So in short, a couple of things. One, I can't tell the government how to do this, but there are public health officials who can provide the necessary inputs for strategy. Two, governments have to balance the economic concerns against the public health concerns, which I think is important. And three, governments cannot allow external actors to dictate domestic policy, right? And they must be ever mindful that their obligation is to the Bahamian citizen and not to, a tourism brand, right? What does all that mean for us on the comm side? It means that we have to be communicating with those tourism stakeholders in a way that says, we appreciate your input. We know that you are important to this industry, and this industry is important to us. However, we also have to be mindful of our citizens' health and their well-being. We have to be communicating with the experts internally and ensuring that we are getting the best information, right? And that the mechanisms are in place, the structures are in place to ensure that our public health actors are getting the information we need to us. And then finally, we need to be communicating to the Bahamian people. We have put in place these things as a stopgap for unemployment, for furloughed employees. We are working as much as possible to get the industry open and back up, but your health is paramount to us, right? And in order to protect that, it may mean we have to do X, Y, and Z. And again, this pandemic is requiring us to operate on multiple levels of messaging, right? Talking to multiple audiences through multiple media. And the pandemic is not going to be the only thing that does this. For those of us in small island developing states, the climate crisis is going to be the next thing that we, or the thing that we are dealing with now. My office looks out on the water, and I just saw 3 tornadoes form on the water on this storm front that's coming into the Bahamas as I'm on this call. And I know that means that power is going to go out at some point. The internet may go out. You know what I mean? And we're leaving pandemic and going into hurricane season, right? And so these challenges are kind of stacking up, and governments have to be prepared to talk to all audiences, gather all the necessary data, and use that to inform strategy and communicate that strategy in ways that connects with the multiple audiences that they have to reach.
Thank you. Adeoye, you had the second question from Donette as well. She wants to know how you've been communicating with your clients about the Black Lives Matter movement.
I'm not sure I'm in the best place to answer this question.
I read it twice. She had your name. It was your name, Addie.
Stuart or Chris might be in a slightly better position. And it's very simple. I'm a Black man living in West Africa. Everybody around me is Black. I think my experience is just a little bit different, right? So, I think I'll be really interested to hear what Chris has to say about this. Not that I'm deflecting. I just don't think I'm in the best position. I apologize, Chris.
I did look twice at the question.
So wait, what was the question again? Remind me.
Donette wanted to know from Adeoye how he has been briefing his clients on the whole subject of Black Lives Matter. So we'll ask you, Chris, and then we'll ask Stuart. Perhaps.
It's interesting because the organization Black Lives Matter actually just hired us to work with them.
Okay.
On their
you knew this, Adeoye. You knew this.
On their overall strategy, as you know, that their BLM, Black Lives Matter, is part of every conversation going on right now. And again, we're living in and working in such sensitive times. We're learning every day. One thing that we've all seen happen over the past couple of weeks, people have mentioned Black Lives Matter, I think, from a very sincere place, but because we're at such a critical time right now and people want to see the work that people are doing and not just talking and saying that you believe in Black Lives Matter, or that you have friends of color and you're down for the cause. People want to see the work that people are doing, and the use of Black Lives Matter has actually come back to bite certain people in the butt, per se, because the media and people on social media are now tired of folks jumping on the bandwagon. They're like, if we haven't seen the work, if we have not heard your voice before, we don't appreciate you using Black Lives Matter. And so, from a messaging perspective, it's something that, we're all in my company, we're always discussing with the clients, because we're in a place now that it's not about being relevant and being part of whatever the popular conversation is. It's about showing the work that you've done to move the work that you've done to assist in moving this movement along. And if you haven't been part of the movement before, then it is wise to stand back and take notes and really understand the dialogue and what's happening out there across the globe before jumping into the conversation. And I think that's really my advice to a lot of people. Town and Country interviewed me last week, and it was the same question of what advice would you give your clients or just people that you do business with. And I just feel like if you haven't been part of that conversation, it is best to educate yourself over the next, just over time, really understand what the dialogue that's going on out there, and that has been going on for many years, as Temu has said, because we've seen it in fashion and entertainment and across several business lanes. Educate yourself before speaking towards it. Do not just jump into that conversation, because we're just in very sensitive times, and people don't want to hear the talk anymore. They want to see people and brands and companies taking real action right now.
Okay.
If I may, I'd like to add in from the, I guess the BLM Caribbean context. So I guess a lot of people here still think that, Black Lives Matter is, a North American problem, and why should, Caribbean brands say anything? And I think if brands make that decision to be a part, or to have their voice thrown into this Black Lives Matter ring, two things. One, they have to be comfortable enough to lose some of their existing customers, and they also have to be brave enough to say the words. So, for example, there is the Regions carrier. I wouldn't call any names, but they did post a Black Lives Matter adjacent post, but they never said the words. They never said Black Lives Matter. It was all they kind of circumvented the issue, put up the black square, but never said the words. And they were taken to task for it, because you can't be on the periphery. You either decide you want to be in it, and when you're in it, you have to not just say the words, but back it up, as Chris was saying. The other thing is, in including yourself in this conversation, you better have the tools and the capacity to have this conversation, particularly from a Caribbean context, where people genuinely may not understand why it is important for Black people, people of color in the diaspora, to be a part of this conversation. One, because it's global. Two, because lots of us travel. And police, for example, are not going to look at me and say, oh, don't worry, I can tell she's not American, she's from Trinidad, leave her alone. That's not what the reality is. So you really have to have the capacity to explain to anybody who is looking on at your brand, why it is important or why you think it is important for Caribbean people to have this conversation, and why it's important for your brand to be a part of this conversation. And you better be, it's not something that you can kind of dip your toe in and then say, oh, no, sorry, I've changed my mind. Starbucks is going through that right now. A couple of years ago, when there was this incident at the Starbucks stores, they shut down on May 29th. I remember it perfectly well, because it was my birthday, and they had this, North American regional training on, racial sensitivity and de-escalation and all of those things within the stores. Fast forward 2 years later, and they've now reversed course, but they didn't allow their staff to wear anything that represented the movement. So you really have to be sure that if you make this decision to enter that Black Lives Matter conversation, you better be able to back it up.
Stuart, what's your take on this? Unmute.
I'm completely behind the Life Matters. The thing is, in London, I've got clients on both sides of the Rhondda. I've got people. My clients are 6% of my clients are Black. I'm completely behind it. And I have lots of other clients who didn't actually understand, because they're through different generations and decades. They just listened to history really, and not really taking it seriously because they didn't really understand it. And I think what Chris said about re-educating people to understand it does matter, and everybody is equal. I think it just comes down to education again, and this will bring people together. But I think it has to come from the government and come from the top. Obviously, there's lots of things going on in the world right now. There's elections going on. There's lots of things around the world going on, which is creating lots of media around this. But I think that it is purely education. I think nothing's going to get sold unless, because we had the protesting in London the last 2 weekends, And the last weekend we had different right-wing groups and lots of people getting injured and fighting on the streets. I mean, it's not going to solve really anything that way. I think it needs really to be educated. It's re-education, and it has to come from the top. Also, come from obviously local people who've got a voice, who've got a platform, whether they're on brands or whether they're, it's a whole. I've seen a great support from the UK, and I think it's really purely education. I think that's the only way to sort of get to carry on and get this movement where it needs to go.
Thank you. Ava Sinclair has a question. Marcia, you can perhaps take this. What messaging do you think consumers want to hear from companies? What resonates with them?
I think, by and large, it's a message of service and trust, security and positivity, what it is we're doing to support and keep safe our employees, our customers, our stakeholders. Some of the messages that are resonating right now are surrounding customer service relationships, people who are giving care packages to communities that are not even within their geographic location, trying to assist people in need, people who are giving banks, for instance, who are giving holidays on repayment of loans and interest and that sort of thing. People who are actually doing something that fundamentally helps somebody else, not just themselves.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Odette, a question. What advice do you have in handling it for those who have lost their businesses, are in debt, no income, and the bills are still staring at them to be paid? How would you handle that situation?
That's interesting. You mean, how do you handle a situation where someone is really at their lowest? I would say figure out what it is that you're really good at, because at this point, perhaps a business needs not to exist, or a client needs to rethink what they do. I think right now, it's hard for us to say the words, but we have to be optimistic. We have to go back to the true position of why we exist. And if a client comes to me and tells me, really, it's all wiped out, the question is what it is you feel you need to do next. Because it's at this point, it's about finding the strength and figure out what you are going to look like in December 2020. What are we going to do? We're going to give up? We're going to throw our hands up in the air and take to the covers? It's about putting one foot in front of the other and figuring out what service I have to deliver and who I'm going to deliver that service to. So even at the, your lowest debt, there must be some point of optimism, of looking forward to better days and working at it. It's not enough for us to say, oh, it's going to be great and better days are ahead. It's how I'm going to work towards those better days.
A question for you, Nisa. Crystal Dardane, I think her surname is. What do you think, Nisa, what did you think of the TNT government's handling of the COVID crisis? And two, can you tell us a little bit more about your business, Pear Consulting, and how your business is adapting in this time? Well, I think you said it earlier, but I'll leave you to answer.
I did. Okay, so thanks, Crystal, for the question. First, I have to say that I think the government of Trinidad and Tobago really did a bang-up job. Evidenced by our numbers, we were able to very quickly flatten the curve. The only positive cases we have now are returning residents who are all quarantined anyway. So, and that has been the case for quite some time. As Joseph mentioned, there is not even just merit, but true need in listening to public health officials, the scientists. and you really have to decide whether or not you're a government, a business, a consumer. You know, what are your principles? Do you prefer to open your country or business or whatever it is in favor of profits versus people? And I think the government really took, you know, the option of the latter, in that they knew businesses were going to be affected. They're still being affected, and it's going to be a long road. But what was, you know, of paramount importance, obviously, was ensuring that, you know, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, both here and abroad, in some sense, were taken care of. Were there a couple missteps along the way? Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think we all know, we've all experienced, you know, whether it's, you know, crisis communication response, planning, whatever it is, you can't go into these things unprepared. But I'm not sure that any government necessarily was prepared to handle a pandemic. Lots of people have playbooks. Whether or not they go to the playbooks as often as they should is another story. But, you know, in spite of all of these things, the government did a really, you know, quite a good job. I think one of the things, or the only thing really I could say that I think was missing was possibly identifying the most, if not all, of their stakeholders. So, for example, parents have now, you know, can go back to work. Businesses are open, but nobody has spoken to parents who have children at home because the schools aren't open, nursery schools aren't open. So, you know, on one hand, you have the population able to work again and, you know, to, generate the economy. But what then becomes of people who they don't have grandparents to leave their children? Daycare was their only hope. The schools are not open. So what then?
Right.
As Joseph also said, it's a very difficult position for any government to be in, but there really have been some standout ones, and, you know, ours was one of them. New Zealand and a couple of other countries that people often refer to as the third world, but we're the ones who really stood out in this global event.
Absolutely.
And to the second part of her question about my company, so Petrie Consulting is a full-service public relations and event management company in Trinidad. But we've also done events all over the world, particularly in cricketing countries, because a lot of our client list, they are international cricketers. So, you know, events up throughout the Caribbean region, India, Africa, and so on. Like I said, those are the events. The strategy side, we do obviously crisis communication, you know, message crafting, brand development, and building. And as Novia would have mentioned at the top of this, my newest project is a company called Move. And what it is, it's my harebrained, but I think really cool idea about using electric tricycles as an alternate form of transport and delivery in the country and the Caribbean. So really just getting that off the ground. And I really do hope that I know that I can, you know, marry the two in terms of brand building, crisis comm, sustainability, all these things that I truly believe, and, you know, the Petrie brand has represented for years, and I think I can parlay them into Move as well. And to any other clients who are listening, shameless plug.
We're not seeing Adi. I'm not too sure if he's run for cover, but just a clarification, read the answer, Adi, the question rather. The question was asked of Nigeria because his client is Pepsi. Odette, yes, it's family and personal. Okay, Odette, it's family and personal relationships. How can we help each other? Is another question for you. And I think another question as well, Odette from Akira Patterson. How do companies prepare for a future in conceivable crises? The COVID pandemic was unforeseen, and the ramifications are still unfolding daily. How do we prepare? Well, there was really no playlist, but now that we have one, perhaps.
Yeah, well, the CDC had a playlist. I understand, a playbook. I understand. Playbook. I don't know if it was totally unforeseen. I mean, anybody who was watching anything would have been alerted to something happening in December in China. And if my husband in particular was like, you see what's happening, you see what's happening. We talk about having all this communication that's coming into us. I think what we possibly don't do enough of, individuals and certainly as companies and as brands, is to see down the line and try and figure out, hey, if something is happening in China in December, could that reverberate in my backyard in March? So the question is that I think at this moment, everybody is a crisis manager. In your homes, you certainly kind of figured out what you needed for a rainy day and what you needed to sustain yourself for 2 weeks when you've been locked down. Companies understand what to do now, certainly when you have to be communicating to your customers about wearing their masks and sanitizing. So I think this experience certainly has taught companies and individuals the importance of thinking through, looking down into the future, and understanding what to do or what they can do when the worst happens. So I'm kind of, it's a hard lesson to learn, but I think we've all across the globe exercised that muscle of survival, certainly in the last 6 months.
A question, well, Chris might want to duck this one. In fact, you know, who knows, he might have declined already. Here's a question for you, Chris, from Donette. How would you advise Jessica Mulroney to handle the her Sasha Exeter moment? Nisa looks as if she wants to answer that one, but we'll answer you first, Chris, since the person wanted you to comment. You can duck it if you want.
1 second to really think about my answer.
Would anybody like to take it? Lisa, would you like to take it? What would your advice be? Okay, nobody wants to take that question. Okay. That deafening silence is from everybody. Okay, leadership. Odette, back to you. Leadership, you said at the beginning. And a question for everybody. How important is leadership? I mean, it sounds, like a rhetorical statement, but how important is leadership when you have the crisis? Quite a few leaders hid. Very few actually went to the mic and took the bull by the horn. What is the importance of leadership? That's the question that everybody seems to be asking.
I think in this environment, leadership has to listen, take a beat, and listen. We tend often to be very reactive. Oh, there's some headline in the newspaper that we need to react to. I think the best leaders are those who listen and really try to connect with the things that they don't know. I also think that in this environment, we have seen the importance of inspirational leadership. So it's not the kind of leadership that is bullying people, but also inspiring them to find their best selves towards the mission. Because we do have a global mission, which is, be it to kick COVID's butt, or be it to live in a world that's more equitable for all. I think that finding a way to connect to that part of you that inspires people is what we needed most at this time.
And to Jeanette, yes, we will have a recorded version of this later on the Observer's website. Just look at the tab webinar and click. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at some of these questions. Okay, a question for you, Nisa. How are you all, well, it's a question for everybody, but Nisa as well. How are you all leading yourselves personally, the health and the wellness of your respective companies? So we'll start with Nisa and we'll take it around.
I'm actually really glad whoever did ask this question. I think it's really important.
That question is coming from Donette Chinoy in Canada.
Thank you, Donette. So a couple of things. First of all, I'm being kind to myself and to others. none of us has been here before. So allow yourself days to be super active. There are days when I'm like, oh my God, it's 3 o'clock and I haven't eaten anything because I'm just doing so much. Then there are other days where I'm just, you just can't be bothered because there's just so much noise going on. And you know, you're also processing your own self, your business, your plans, you know, the things you had planned this quarter, next year. And it can become quite overwhelming. And I know, you know, another of these buzzwords or phrases is self-care, but it is really so important right now, whatever self-care looks like to you. And what it looks like for me, it is kindness. It is allowing myself to be in my feelings sometimes, but it's also allowing myself to be super productive and capitalizing on time that we all said we didn't have before. You know, so I, for example, I'm finally, after maybe about 3 or 4 years, doing this project management certification that I've always said I wanted to do. And I allowed myself that kind of freedom to do that. For me, what it also means, it's a hard balance between, or striking this balance between wanting to stay informed and wanting to not be overwhelmed. Because if we thought news cycles were quick before, now it is, you know, 2020 is next level. But you also have to know what you're able to take. So I always had a policy pre-COVID that, you know, I stopped reading any hard news at 11 o'clock, unless it's, you know, groundbreaking, you know, sky is falling, it's an event the next morning, and I absolutely have to handle it, which I will if I need to. My cutoff is 11 p.m. And I allow myself to either read, have some tea, have some wine, watch garbage TV, whatever I need to kind of, you know, unplug from the day. You really can't be turned on all the time. So for me, particularly with the combination of COVID, of Black Lives Matter, of the unrest, of, you know, the possibility of a second wave happening everywhere, I have limited my own social media time. I really wish more social media platforms were like Twitter that allowed you to mute certain words, because it really does become, you know, quite overwhelming. But you do what you must. You know, there are articles that I scroll by, and maybe pre-COVID I would have read it, but now I'm like, you know what, maybe not today. I always say the devil is in the details, and I don't need to meet the devil. So there are really just some things that I just say, you know what, Nisa, this is not your fight, it's not for you, or do it, I can fight this tomorrow. You know, you don't have to pick up every fight. And lastly, backspace is your friend. There are lots of times where I, you know, want to comment on social media or respond to something, but again, I kind of be like, you know what, let me just hit this backspace key and just keep scrolling, leave it where it is. Or even if I'm crafting an email, I kind of think, okay, let me just kind of reset, get myself into this headspace that really would allow me to give the best of me.
Joseph, how are you kind to yourself?
So work is really important to me. It is really tied to my personal self-worth, and that can be a problem sometimes, right? The way that I usually would care for myself is travel, and in the current environment, it's been. I met Nisa at Trinidad Carnival earlier this year, so it's really great to see her.
I know what you mean, Joey. Like, I feel almost sane when I just need that, you know, it's 737, that rumble of that jet. I get it.
It gives you separation, right? And as tragic as so much of this time has been, and not being able to travel, what I've done is use the break that COVID-19 pandemic gave me in the first 2 weeks to really do a couple of things. One, become more of an adult, right? Because, you know, it was work and travel, which meant making money and spending money. And so I've spent a lot of time kind of thinking about my goals and my finances and really kind of organizing that part of my life that's always playing in the back of your head and can be a stressor for you, even if it's not top of mind. The other thing for me has been really reading more, stopping and leaving things like news out of the picture, and going back to the things that I enjoy digesting and engaging. This is gonna sound weird, but my nephew now has a new phone. He's 13 and he loves anime. So I've gotten into, when we talk about mindless TV,
yes.
I've gotten into watching cartoons and talking to him about that. And that's a really great way for me to take my mind off of some of the heavy stuff that we do. And then even though it can be emotionally taxing, my background is in sociology. I was an advocate before I got into a lot of this corporate work. And so going back to some of the causes that mean a lot to me in this moment has been a way for me to exercise parts of myself that the business sometimes does not require. And the business monopolizes a lot of my thinking, my emotional work, et cetera. And so for me, taking a breath, organizing things in my life that were bothering me before, but I just didn't have time to fix, right? Finding new ways to connect with family and turn myself off are all strategies that I've been using to kind of care for myself a bit.
Thank you. Marcia, how have you been kind to yourself?
Well, a number of ways. Over the last 3 or so months, I've been homebound, working from home, as they coin it. I've discovered a lot of things. I've discovered television, once again. I have new friends, Steve, Wendy, and Ellen. That would be Steve Harvey, Wendy Williams, and Ellen DeGeneres, that I find quite hilarious. Now I have time to look at them. I have found that I actually have some chefing skills. Been making some Trini food too, what's-up shot and doubles, and not doing too badly, if I do say so myself.
Who are you feeding? Who are you feeding with it, Marcia?
My son and my husband are the guinea pigs, right? And they're very brutal, so when they say it's good, I believe them. I really. I've found out that retail therapy is absolutely critical the moment you're called by your favorite shop. And funny enough, so those are some of the things that I'm doing. I find that I'm finding stuff on the TV and on the computer, and so that I didn't have time to look at before, and that is expanding my mind in a lot of different areas as well. And FaceTime is my beautiful go-to medium now, both to connect with family overseas, friends overseas, colleagues overseas, talking about much of the same things that we are talking about today. How are you fending? How are you coping in COVID-19? Do you still have clients on the books? How are you managing with them? How are you adding value to them? And I find that, that has given me a little breathing space. Yeah.
Adeoye, how are you finding breathing space?
For me, I started I'm a creature of routine, so I needed a routine when COVID started and I was stuck in my house. So what I decided to do was I started a program called Bible in 1 Year. And then I started meditating properly using an app that a friend recommended to me. So my routine was very simple. I woke up at 6 a.m. in the morning. I went for a run for an hour. I came back, I meditated, and then I read my Bible, and then I started my day. So it was pretty simple. I have to say it's completely changed my life. And I'm keen to see if I would stick with this because using the language of being kind to yourself, I think this is the first time I've been kind to myself in my entire 37 years of existence. So I'm very making this sort of like the new MO, so to speak. So I had to create a routine, and I'm very grateful for that routine because I think it's helped a lot, especially mentally. Yeah.
Here's a question for you, Adio. How would you coach leaders to help high-risk staff quiet their anxiety in the face of COVID-19?
I mean, that is a brilliant question.
That's from Norma Williams.
One of the things this period has taught me also is asking ourselves the question, are we leaders, right? And I think the biggest characteristic for me of a leader is just the capacity to communicate effectively and really being able to really understand when to go hard and when to go soft. And I think, when I think about my organization, for example, we have, I call them the millennial generation. We've got a lot of talented, creative young people working at the organization. And when we started, they were really insecure, especially because a lot of the marketing contracts were suspended, so it became a situation where we had to have real hard conversations as an agency. And all I've just tried to do over the last sort of 2.5 months is just ensure that we're constantly communicating on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. We've tried our best to put as much structure in place so that it doesn't seem like there's been too much downtime. But for me, I think the most important thing really as a leader right now is just really being able to communicate really effectively in-house, which is, I've always said they're your biggest advocates. So in-house first, and then external, which is obviously on the client side. So for me, that's the biggest key learning.
Thank you. Tamu, what would your message be to fashion brands as you approach them, as they approach you? You need to unmute.
In terms of being kind to ourselves, in terms of leadership, in terms of...
No, what would your message be as the brands they continue to approach you every single day, as you approach them, as you converse with them, as you move forward with them?
Well, 100% I would tell anyone that I was speaking to that one action is not going to put them on the path and the footing for where they need to be. I feel like initially a lot, actions have been taken, and I think that this is where we see the white fragility in terms of thinking that, the act of coming out with a statement is going to appease us, and it's not. And I see how fragile some of the people that I'm speaking to are, because they're frustrated that that immediate act isn't received the way that they want it to be received. And this is the key. This is going to be a this is in response to the Black Lives Matters movement and what's taking place in fashion now. This is going to be a long road, and everyone that I'm speaking to, I've been emphasizing, and I always say, remember, 401 years of inequality. Your action in posting something, in writing a letter, in setting up a committee, in donating to an org is just the first step. And in order to transform your organization into an anti-racist organization, it's going to take massive work. And this is when you find out what massive work means. And that is the most important message that I have for brands at this moment.
As you can all see, it's easier said than done. Strategizing, handling, is, 8 people, 2 hours later, we're still waiting for Chris to tell us about the Sasha situation, but we'll come back to him on the next webinar. It's all good. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much, Joseph Gaskins, co-founder and senior partner of Open Current, Marcia Erskine, managing director, Marcia Erskine and Associates, Nisa Pierre, managing director, principal publicist at Pear Tree Consulting and CEO at Move, Odette Dixon-Neath, corporate communications lead, Chris Chambers, principal of the Chamber Group, Stuart Watts, award-winning global entertainment publicist, Adeoye Omatayo, director R&B Public Relations Limited, and Tamu McPherson, founder of All the Pretty Birds. To our viewers, you can sit back and listen carefully to everything that these strategists had to say by logging on, find the Observer's website and click on the webinar button. I'd like to thank, as always, our sponsors, Sagicor, Digicel, and Carreras. And, of course, to our viewers for listening, to our Observer team. And thank you for handling. The strategists certainly have spoken. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Sagicor e-advantage, bank with ease, as you please, like a breeze, pay no fees, rain or shine, save your time, it's so fine when you bank online.
Finally, there's a savings account that meets your need for speed and ease. Sagicor Bank e-advantage, bank online, no monthly fees, unlimited free Sagicor Bank ABM withdrawals, interest on your money. Sagicor Bank e-advantage.
It's so fine when you bank online.
Open your Sagicor Bank e-advantage account today.